It is 0 hour 30 Universal Time. I'm Jim Tedder in Washington. The leader of Hezbollah says 2 captured Israeli soldiers will not be released without a prisoner exchange with Israel. Hassan Nasrallah spoke Thursday on the Arabic television station Al Jazeera. He appeared one day after Israeli airplanes bombed a building where top Hezbollah leaders were believed to be staying. Mr. Nasrallah said none of the group's leaders was harmed. Thursday, Israel attacked targets across Lebanon for a 9th straight day. Israeli soldiers again entered Lebanon. Hezbollah also fired more rockets into Israel. Israel says 11 of its soldiers and an unknown number of Hezbollah fighters were wounded in the fighting. Arab broadcasters say 3 Israeli soldiers were killed. United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan has called for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Lebanese Shiite group Hezbollah. Mr. Annan told the UN Security Council that a ceasefire would permit diplomacy to find an answer to the crisis. He said Israel has used too much force in Lebanon. But he also said Hezbollah forced Israel to act and should release 2 captured Israeli soldiers. Mr. Annan called for a peacekeeping force in Lebanon. He also called for an international conference to establish a date by which Lebanon would take control of all of its territory. The American State Department says Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice will travel to the Middle East, but it says conditions are not right for a ceasefire. Israeli forces have killed 3 Palestinians as they continued a 3-week offensive in the Gaza Strip. At least 100 Palestinians have been killed during Israel's Gaza offensive. United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan has called for an immediate ceasefire. Israel has withdrawn from Gaza, did so last year, after 38 years of occupation. A spokesman for the United States military in Iraq says rebels are preparing for a major attack on Baghdad. Major General William Caldwell said Thursday that attacks against American and Iraqi forces in Baghdad have increased greatly since last Friday. Also, the top Shiite religious leader in Iraq has warned that violence between religious groups could destroy the country. Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani urged religious and political leaders, tribal chiefs, and others to make their strongest efforts to stop the killing. In other news, 5 people were killed when a car bomb exploded in the northern city of Kirkuk. A total of at least 35 people were killed Thursday across the country. People in the Somali town of Baidoa say Ethiopian troops have entered the base of Somalia's temporary government. They say the troops are there to protect the base from Islamic armed groups. Ethiopia has denied the report. But Ethiopia's information minister says the country is prepared to invade Somalia to defend the temporary government. The United States has urged Ethiopia to avoid conflict. Top Islamic officials have threatened action against Ethiopia unless the troops are removed. The temporary government has United Nations support, but little power outside of Baidoa. You are listening to the news in VOA Special English. Former Khmer Rouge commander Da Mok has died in Cambodia. His death follows weeks of hospital treatment for heart and lung problems. Da Mok was expected to face human rights charges at a United Nations-backed war crimes court next year. He was at least 80 years old. The Khmer Rouge ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. The group is blamed for the deaths of nearly 2 million Cambodians. The top United States diplomat to North Korea says he was mistaken when he said that some Iranian officials saw recent missile tests by North Korea. Christopher Hill told the Associated Press that he has no evidence that Iranians were in North Korea. Mr. Hill made the claim Thursday before a United States Senate committee. He also said North Korea had what he called a number of business relations with Middle Eastern countries involving missiles. Also Thursday, the Kyodo News Service in Japan reported that North Korea called its ambassadors home earlier this week for an emergency meeting. Earlier, the United Nations passed a resolution calling for weapons restrictions against North Korea in reaction to its missile tests. The chief of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization says the international community should do more in Afghanistan. Secretary General Jaap de Hoop Scheffer said this month's expansion of NATO troops in Afghanistan should be matched by an equal number of troops from other countries. The NATO chief called on the international community to increase efforts to help develop Afghanistan. In other news, the United States military says it will pay more than $112,000 to victims of a traffic accident in Kabul. On May 29th, the accident led to rioting. At least 20 people were killed in the incident. President Bush says the United States wants to support peace in southern Sudan and in that country's Darfur area. Mr. Bush met with Sudan's southern area president, Salva Kiir, Thursday in Washington. The two leaders discussed the peace agreement that ended Sudan's civil war last year. Mr. Bush also said they talked about the situation in the western Darfur area and about efforts to send United Nations peacekeepers there. The Sudanese government has rejected any deployment of UN peacekeepers in Darfur. And now, briefly, here again is the major news of the hour. The leader of Hezbollah says 2 captured Israeli soldiers will not be released without a prisoner exchange with Israel. United Nations Secretary-General Kofi Annan has called for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Lebanese Shiite group Hezbollah. And a spokesman for the United States military in Iraq says rebels are preparing for a major attack on Baghdad. And that's the news in VOA Special English. This is Jim Tedder reporting.